Hi, everyone. Welcome to Radiant Living, Inspiring Humanity to Thrive. I'm Marisa B, and today I have with me Jennifer ffolliott Oujla. Jennifer was a social worker and a pastoral care worker, and later started her own two businesses. I'm going to have her tell you today. One is called Caregiver Carekit, and the other one is called Dementia Carekit. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to start these two businesses? Because I find them so very important, especially dealing with something like this right now with an aunt.
So um, it's kind of an interesting story. Um, I have two children of my own, and then my nephew lives with me. And so all three of them have special needs. So I have the two boys are autistic, and my daughter has FASD. And so that was very challenging for me as a new mom and trying to figure out what was going on with these kids and so forth. Both of my children are adopted, so I had no biological history.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I went into it as parenting, but it was a lot of work. Like, it was a lot of appointments and a lot of soul searching and a lot of reading and trying to figure out what was going on. But I never looked at it more than parenting. So, come up to about 10 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with dementia. He actually had dementia for about 16 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
I jumped into helping my mom caregive for him. I lived a province away. So for the first part, it was long distance caregiving
Mm-hmm.
for both of them. And then when it got to be too much for my mom, then my daughter and I moved back to the province of BC and left the boys behind and actually daily did caregiving activities to help take the stress off of my mom.
Wow.
But it was in that period of time that I realized that I had done more than parent my own children, that I was actually a caregiver to them. And we now call it extraordinary parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And we really make a point of helping um, parents understand that dealing with special needs children is more than just parenting and all the things that come with that.
And it is
So,
indeed, isn't it? There
oh, absolutely.
people don't realize if they're not doing it, right? It's only someone who does it that understands another parent that's doing it.
Absolutely. And not understanding how much you're giving up
Mm-hmm.
of your own life and trying to put that balance back into that. So my first company, Dementia Carekit, was born out of the fact that my mom she could find support groups for dementia,
Mm-hmm.
but she could not find any actual training on how to take care of a person who has dementia. And so that's how that was born. And I took my training through Alzheimer's in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, made the company solely focused on dementia caregivers. But as we went through, and I have a business partner, as we kind of went through it, there were more and more things that came up about children with special needs,
Mm-hmm.
mental health, um, cancer survivors, children with cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that caregiving is caregiving,
Mm-hmm.
just caregiving.
And it's a big job, isn't it?
But
You don't realize it.
yeah, but how you deal with someone that has dementia as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with someone that has cancer is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where our second company was born, Caregiver Carekit, which embodies all the different types of caregiving
Mm-hmm.
in one center. But my specialty is dementia, so I really wanted to hold on to that piece that
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of separate, even though our other company deals with that too.
Which is very
Um,
difficult, right? I mean, it's very, very difficult because there are different types of dementia also, or different stages perhaps. And not
there are
everybody
different.
understands that because not everybody deals with that on a regular basis. So how would one know if it happens to them in their family? Where do you even go? I mean, I find that the service that you provide is fantastic because really it's the first place that someone can call.
Yes. Yes, it is. And you're right. There are different types of dementia. There's vascular and there's
Mhm.
Lewy body, and it just broadens Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
um, broadens out from there. And there are different stages. And generally, the family knows that their loved one is in a state of dementia over time, long before the diagnosis happens.
Mhm.
So even if you just suspect that that's where we're headed, there we offer a lot of things that you can do before the doctor will actually diagnose you.
Mhm.
And there is a reason for that. There's a reason why the diagnose takes so long. And one of those reasons is that when somebody is in a state of dementia, they can no longer sign off for themselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
So doctors and physicians and so forth, they don't want to do that to a person until they absolutely have to.
And I know, for example, I know you're in Canada, correct? You're in
Yes.
Canada. In the United States, for example, you need a specialty psychologist to do the testing. Not every doctor, not every psychologist or clinical psychologist going to sign off on any documentation until the testing's done. And you have to find somebody specifically that does the testing. And
Yep.
that also puts a lot of frustration on the person with dementia because they really don't want to go there and they don't want to really deal with that. And if I'm correct, sometimes they've masked some of their symptoms
Yes.
um, courageously, intelligently, and so they don't want to go to those tests because they don't want to have anything revealed. So it's a very difficult problem to deal with.
Yeah, and that's kind of at the stage where you're still, something's like the person knows something's wrong, that
Mhm.
something's off, but they're still clear enough to know that something is off.
Mhm.
And dementia is about losing your independence. It's about it's more than about not being able to remember. It's about losing and regressing
Mhm.
back in stages. You lose your driver's license, you lose your ability to sign off on things that you would normally do. And sometimes their minds are not clear,
Mhm.
but they have moments of clarity or longer periods of clarity. So half the time they know they can do it, and the other half the time they can't
Mhm.
remember that they can do it. And so it's very difficult. But if you don't understand why your loved one is doing these things, it makes it for a very frustrating and very rocky relationship. So we strive to help caregivers understand what is happening inside their loved one's brain so that they can go, oh, this is the disease, not the person. My person is still there, but he has a disease and it's doing funny things. And I need to pick out when it's doing it and when it's not,
Mhm.
until you get to the stages where you flip over to the other side and you just know that they're not thinking clearly
Right.
anymore.
So so give me an example of what you provide, because as I said, I've dealing with this somewhat, and we're not sure whether this is medication causing this or not. This was a fairly independent aunt. And so, and I know, for example, that there are family members that want to, when she says something, want to correct her. I just go with whatever she says because that's just more or less how I am in the nature of the job that I do. I just go, whatever she says, I go with it because I find that when you try to change it frustrates them. It can cause an issue. So, but some of the other family members may not want to hear what I have to say. So I want to know, like, how do you handle, what you provide for the people? Because the people that come to you, they need really probably every kind of help. They have to learn about Well, in any case, I mean, they're dealing, if you're coming for children with autism or children that are on the spectrum, or you're coming for as a caretaker for someone with dementia, you have to learn all these things. So I'm sure that you have that component, correct?
Absolutely. So in the beginning, we go through what the diagnosis is. So I'll take dementia, or even if it's undiagnosed,
Mhm.
what are you dealing with? What is this looking like? Um, it could be because there are markers that you kind of go through. So in the beginning of dementia, it's very broad, like certain little things happen and you kind of go, oh, this doesn't really seem right, but I'll go with it.
Mhm.
And then as it speeds up, and dementia can be very, very slow, or it can be very, very fast. But as it speeds up, you'll have more markers that make you go, no, I think I need to take this person to the doctor. And then it just goes from there. So what we do is we go through what the stages are, what they look like, what are the most notable things. Everybody is different, everybody is unique.
Mhm.
So they won't hit all the markers, or there might be different things that come up. So, but there's a general sense of what is happening when your mind is not working correctly anymore. Um, so we go through all that with everyone. And then we kind of, I mean, we're there to support and teach.
Mhm.
So we teach everybody the same stuff, but when we do individual counseling, we deal with the person who is having these questions, and we go with what they are telling us. So if they have a specific thing that they're really worried about,
Mhm.
that's where we go to. So every individual counseling session can be completely different
Mhm.
depending on who they are dealing with.
Now, do you
But
only
when
deal
we,
with Canada? Do you only deal with Canada
oh
or
no, worldwide.
worldwide? Okay.
Yep, worldwide. Um, my stats when I speak are generally just Canada and the US. But no, we will, as long as there's no language barriers, we will
Mhm.
do it worldwide, because this is happening worldwide.
Yes. Yes.
And we know that in Canada, the projection uh, for dementia is set to double by 2030, which
Mhm.
is only 6.75 years away. Um, but it's also set to double in the US. So if you take the two countries, you're pretty sure that it's just going to do this worldwide.
Mhm.
Um, they're not exactly sure. I try to keep abreast of all the research as
Mhm.
much as I can, very daily,
Mhm.
because it changes really, really fast. So I know that the UK is also um, very focused on dementia, and they're also set to double. So when you start realizing that some of your major countries are having the same projections,
Mhm.
then the chances are worldwide that they're having the same projections, but they're not quite sure why
Right.
it's set
Right.
to double.
Now, so you're providing information, you're providing services to caretakers that are dealing with this. Now, how about the caretaker themselves? Because I know, for example, clients that have come to me that are caretaking either a spouse or a parent, and a lot of times they're burnt out, um, they're exhausted, they're upset. Sometimes they can't cope. Do you also have services for that, or do you send them to someone else?
Nope, we have services for that, but they're not separate services. So when somebody comes into one of our programs, we help them deal with what they're dealing with right now, today,
Mhm.
with their loved one. And then we slowly help them recognize that they need to take care of themselves, because they're not focused on themselves.
Mhm.
They are focused on their loved one.
Mhm.
And a very high percentage don't even realize that they're not taking care of themselves anymore.
Mhm.
So we do draw it back to the person that is caregiving and making sure that their
Mhm.
needs are being met. There's some really big stigmas attached
Mhm.
and financial hardships attached, and we try to make sure that they're getting a total rounded support system
Mhm.
for themselves and their loved one.
And how many people do you usually have? I mean, it's not a caseload, but similar to a caseload because you're carrying so many people that you're helping. How many people do you generally help, say, on a monthly basis? Because you say you have a partner, but I'm assuming you actually have other workers as well in your business.
Yes, and my partner does different. Actually, my partner right now is working with young caregivers under 25.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's a whole different set of
Mm-hmm.
caregiving. Um, so we try to keep it at no more than 20 people a month,
Monthly, yes.
and our programs are for 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, we try to keep it very small, so that they're getting the best uh, and most accurate information
Mm-hmm.
and help and support for the time, but it's rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So um, per
Right.
coach is just like 20 people max.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually even try to keep it under that so that it's not too large and not too many people are
Mm-hmm.
trying to do different things, because they're just, all people are so different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in our group programs, we keep them small.
The reason I ask is because I'm assuming that so many people contact you because more people than we care to think about need these services. Really, honestly, they really are truthfully seeking these types of services because they don't know where to turn. I mean, I know you go to a medical doctor, and especially if we're going to speak about, say, dementia, you're going with your parent or your relative, and you're going there and you know what the medical doctor's telling you. But then after that, when you walk out of the place, it's almost, number one, like you didn't hear anything they said
Yeah,
or remember anything that they said to you. And number two, when you go home, it's only you and you're in the caretaker mode. What do you do then? There's really no place to turn because you're not going to, the doctor has other patients that they're seeing. Am I correct? I mean, you can't just call the doctor anytime you want and say, I need help. That's not going to work that way.
especially nowadays after
Yes.
COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, very difficult to do. And that's exactly right. We work, so we're a holistic non-medical company,
Mm-hmm.
and that's exactly what we do, is we work in parallel to the
Mm-hmm.
doctors. We don't want anybody not to go to the doctor. You need to be following what
Mm-hmm.
he says and what he does.
Mm-hmm.
We just do the other half of, we're here for your questions, and we'll train you, just like you were talking about your aunt. We'll
Mm-hmm.
train you how to talk to somebody that has dementia, because it's different. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
train you how to uh, know when not to say anything, just go with it,
Mm-hmm.
and why there's a difference. And then there's just so many things, dementia patients sundown. So if your spouse
Mm-hmm.
or partner is up all night
Mm-hmm.
and you're not sleeping, we help you to sort that out, to make sure that you get your rest
Mm-hmm.
and understand why your partner is up all night. There's a reason for it. So all the different
Mm-hmm.
components of dementia.
Now, I'm assuming you also
We
provide resources, external resources for people, I'm assuming, information.
absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely,
because it really is a package, isn't it? It's a complete package that has to be given to someone when they have to deal with this.
absolutely. And we want them to have as much information, but not too much that they can't sort it out.
Mm-hmm.
But we want them to have as much information so that they can make their own decisions on what is the best way to help their partner.
Mm-hmm. And now, how can somebody get a hold of you? Because, of course, you have two separate websites, correct? There's two separate
Yes.
websites.
They are two separate websites, but they are also connected.
Oh, they are.
Um,
Because I know what'll
and
happen. We're talking mostly dementia, but then someone may contact me from the audience and say, I need information on Alzheimer's. And, or I mean, I need information on autism, or I need some help with information about autism, or and I know that if I can provide them with all of that in the description to let them know, because I know that inevitably that happens.
Yep. So Caregiver Carekit is just simply caregivercarekit.ca is our website, and caregivercarekit@gmail.com. You can contact us directly. And then just Dementia Carekit is dementiacarekit.com and dementiacarekit@gmail.com. So we try to keep it very simple.
Now, how do you think the future is going to go for this? I mean, my opinion is that it just seems to be getting larger and larger, the issues, and almost like the people providing the services are going to need caregivers, caregiver help, caregiver respite at some point, because that's also another thing, the respite, the days of respite that one person may need, because if you're always doing that job and you have no other help. Yeah. I mean, how do you think that that's going? Am I incorrect that it's getting to become a larger problem?
Oh, no. This is definitely going to become a larger problem. We know that it's going to grow and very quickly over the next 6 years. They also have projections for 2050, but I just try to stay small. So over the next 6 years. So companies like me will grow. But I think also companies that provide actual professional caregiving, which is different from me.
Right.
I'm working one-on-one, but companies that provide professional caregiving are really going to grow too, because at some point there will be a breaking point where a family caregiver who is unpaid and has to be at home and so forth is just not going to be able to do it anymore, or we're going to have a lot of mental health issues. So we're trying to intervene before that happens. And when I speak, on stage, one of my main messages is if you don't think you're going to be a caregiver in your lifetime, like to younger people, 2 out of 4 for sure are going to be a caregiver in their lifetime, whether it's for a parent with dementia or whether it's to a child or a spouse. This is the way the world is going. And it's better to know that upfront than to deal with it in crisis.
Oh, absolutely. And do you think, I think that everybody really should be taught. I mean, anybody in a helping profession should really be taught about this, because I don't think that everybody knows what to do. No. Right. I mean, even in a medical situation, I don't think every doctor, every nurse, every CNA knows what to do or how to interact maybe with someone with dementia. I think there should be more teaching.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Right.
And I think that that's fair, because you and I in our own professions don't know what is happening in other professions. So I think that even in the healthcare profession, we can't expect that everybody's going to know what to do or say.
That's true.
Yeah, so I think it's really important. And I think it's important to understand that there are different perspectives too. A doctor has a different perspective than I do, than maybe a physiotherapist would, because they're focused on what they're trying to do to help their patient or their client.
Right.
and the perspective is different.
But I
And
still
so
think they should know, though. They should at least know maybe the signs or the symptoms, because if you're not prepared, I mean, as you said, a physiotherapist, yes, that individual with their family member who might be taking them there is getting some sort of service. And yes, you're providing that service, but you have to still know how to deal with someone, because, you're having conversation with someone. There has to be a way to know how to deal with them, I would think.
absolutely. But from a caregiver's perspective,
Well, that's
who is
that's
going
much
from the
different.
doctor to maybe physio to
Yes.
maybe respite, they have to understand why every single one of them has a different perspective. Because that is some feedback that we've had, that why is everybody on a different page? Well, because their perspective is different. So let me help you understand why their perspective is different. Because once you understand it, it makes sense.
Well, that's where you come in to explain, because they are going to deal with that. Especially if they are the caregiver, they are going to deal with those different people on different days of the week. And they will have to see that. I think because it's so, coming from a therapy standpoint, from a psychotherapy standpoint, and having caregivers that are exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, sometimes it's so much for them to bear. They're going from one place to another. They're trying to be the dutiful child, the dutiful spouse. They're trying to do the right thing, but it's so overwhelming for them that sometimes they can't see the forest for the trees. They don't even understand the other perspectives, because they don't have the time to understand them. The physical and a mental time, because they're so busy doing. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is absolutely what I do, is to help them see the forest for the trees.
Well, it's wonderful, the service you provide. Wonderful service that you provide.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're busy all the time, because especially when people find out about it, right? It's one thing that they don't know. That's why actually I was so thrilled that you had the time to come on and speak with the audience, because if someone doesn't know where to turn, that's why we need to get the word out, because you can find a place to turn to that can help you on this path.
Absolutely. And we will do anything to help anyone that comes through our doors. Even though we keep our groups small, that doesn't mean that we don't have room for people. We are very dedicated to this caregiving, very dedicated to it, because and everybody on my team is a caregiver. So they know exactly, they may not know exactly the type of situation that you're going through, but they know exactly where you're coming from. So they know how hard it is. They know how emotional it is. They know that most people are in crisis mode or survival mode. And they have that empathy and compassion for where you're at when you walk through the door.
So now you say it's about a 5-month program that you offer.
Yeah, we offer it twice a year. So 5 months, and then we offer it again for 5 months. And then we have other little groups and so forth that people can enter into if they wish. I have a writing group that is going to start fairly soon here in the fall. People that deal and caregive for people with dementia, they absolutely love to write about it. And I really enjoy those groups.
Oh, that's wonderful that you provide that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so we have a couple different things going on. But our mainstay is making sure people get educated and can understand what is going on, so that they can go forward and ultimately end up coming back to themselves and taking care of themselves, because burnout is high.
Oh, yes. And so now all of this is on your website, so everybody can get this information. For example, the writing group, because I know someone's going to ask me about that. They're going to say, because, that is a way of expressing yourself and expressing your feelings, expressing what you're going through, right? Because as the caretaker, often people don't ask too much what you're going through. This is a way to vocalize it, but on paper.
Absolutely. And it's very therapeutic. It's very therapeutic when you can write down your own thoughts.
Yes.
And what you're going through, and then look at it and go, wow, I didn't really realize I had been doing so much, or, I didn't really see this before. It's a really, that's my favorite group, is the
Now
writing
that's
group.
done online. How do you do
Yep.
that? That's online.
We do it online. So we do in-person
Hmm.
stuff in our area
Yes.
or
Okay.
when I travel,
Hmm.
but everything else is done online so
Hmm.
that we can meet the needs of as many people
Right.
as possible.
Right. Open the opportunity to people that are far away and couldn't possibly get to something like that. And now at least they have that avenue.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And so, is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience today? I know it's a subject that we could go on and on and on because, let's face it, this is just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Yes. It's very broad. So I think I'd like to tell the audience today that, you know, caregiving and the needs of other people are very, very important.
Mhm.
And I think in our world today, we have to have a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy. And we just really need to help one another. At the end of the day, we need to help one another. So if you're a caregiver, a family caregiver, helping a loved one or helping a parent or even a friend, and you need some perspective, you need to be trained in some areas, you need help understanding what is going on with your loved one, just send us an email and we'll do an assessment on what your needs are and we'll go from there. It's we've got your back
Mhm.
and we're there to support you.
Which is what's important, right? Because so many
Yeah.
people feel that no one has their back
Yeah.
when they feel all alone, isolated, right? Even though they have other family members that they might speak to, they still feel isolated. They still feel all alone, as if no one understands really what they're going through. Whereas your agency, of course, has that. They know because, like you said, they know where people are coming from. So they have experience with what they're going to hear.
Yeah. And we do a lot of work with isolation and loneliness,
Mhm.
because there's an actual thing that happens when you are in crisis and come out of crisis,
Mhm.
where people kind of just disappear. So we not only help the caregiver understand that, but we also invite family and friends in,
Mhm.
to a session or two, depending on how many we have, to help them understand why they don't have to leave,
Mhm.
why they don't have to be afraid to speak with someone with dementia.
Mhm.
And then we help them to open the conversations themselves, to maintain those relationships, um, that nothing is going to happen. It's just going to enlighten both sides
Mhm.
of the equation. It helps the person with dementia not feel so lonely. It helps the caregiver not be isolated, but it also adds value to your own life
Mhm.
to
Oh,
be able to talk to people and stay
yes.
with people and support people.
Oh, absolutely, especially someone that is going through that crisis of dementia because it's isolating for them as well.
Yeah.
It really is. It's isolating. It's terrifying for them, especially when they're in that stage, right? Where they know something's wrong or something's happening, but they don't quite know what it is.
Yeah.
Um, it's scary for them. Now, do you ever get anybody back? I've had clients that have come after the caretaking. I actually have one in particular that had come and said to me, I've had done that job for so many years. I don't know what to do now. It was almost like they were identifying with that. Do you have people coming to you like that?
We do. We call it the before and the after.
Mm-hmm.
So and in all caregiving pieces, but in dementia, we are very sensitive about it, but as things get closer to the end,
Mm-hmm.
we start working with the caregiver about what comes after,
Mm-hmm.
because all they see is up to the end. They can't really see farther than that because they're heavily engrossed in it. So we try to gently help them see what is going to come after and start making a plan. So what
Because
does this look
sometimes,
like?
right, with dementia, the after sometimes comes during the time that the person with dementia is still alive. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but it's not that you abandon that person, but the interaction is not the same anymore. So there is, right, there's almost a loss in the middle of the disease for the
Absolutely.
caretaker. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. How to grieve while somebody is still living. So yes, we do that. I actually dealt with that when my dad passed. So when my dad passed, there were very few emotions. And that scared me because I just thought I was supposed to grieve like everybody else did. But it took a friend of mine in New York, a trauma therapist, to kind of shake me and say, no, you've been grieving for the last 10 years. Now, what do you really feel? And I said, well, I actually feel relief, and
Yeah.
that's just such a wrong emotion. And she said, no,
No.
that's the right emotion because you've already grieved him. You got him through to the end, and now you're it wasn't happy. It was now you're resolved at the fact that he is no longer in pain.
Right.
And my dad was in a lot of pain. Um, and it was time. And from that moment on, I was able to carry on because I realized that we have this idea of what grief should be about and
And of
what it
course,
looks.
everybody grieves differently, and everybody grieves a different amount of time. We can't ever say to someone, get over it or don't grieve that way, because it is very
Exactly.
personal.
But for me, it was so opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thought something was wrong with me. But in actuality, there was nothing at all wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as somebody told me what was happening, I could understand it and then I could move
Mm-hmm.
on. And I love my dad, but I would never wish him back in the form he was in
Yeah.
because he was in so much pain and he didn't know who he was with or where he was. And that was not my dad in real life. Um,
And you said he
so
suffered 16 years.
16 years. It was slow moving,
Yes.
but the last uh the last 4 years he quickened up, and the
Right.
last 2 years were actually the last 18 months were very fast.
Which I
So
understand from some medical doctors that deal with this, that does happen, that they can
yes,
stay in a stage for quite a number of years. And then if it does progress, it can progress quickly.
yeah, we call that falling off the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have this dramatic change,
Mm-hmm.
it signifies a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you can never be sure because everybody's different, right?
Right, right.
But in my dad's case, it was a very typical movement through stages. And when he fell off the cliff, it was very, very quick after that. Um, and it's really hard when I was helping my dad brush his teeth, and you know, he kind of brought his head up and he looked at me and he said, "Who's that man in the room?" And he got all frightened, and I realized he was looking at himself and he couldn't recognize himself.
Mm-hmm.
And and that was so sad.
Indeed,
So
it is.
so that also is one of the other things I do with caretaker or caregivers is help reframe their memories so that really sad stuff we can turn back into a
Right,
joyful memory,
right.
so that not that we want to take away the fact that this isn't a really sad disease. It is.
Mm-hmm.
But if your memories are so sad all the time,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it very hard to move forward. So we reframe some of the memories so that they become joyful memories,
Right.
and we leave the sadness behind so that you can actually remember somebody without it being devastating. every time you remember them.
Right, because that can happen.
Yes.
That can indeed happen, especially when you're dealing with all of this towards the end. It can indeed, that all your memories are sad ones.
Yeah.
It's true. My gosh, there's so much to talk about with this subject, isn't there? We could go on and on. I mean, it's just wonderful that you're providing this service. I absolutely will let the audience have all the information. I thank you so much for coming today. Like I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg, really, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Sadly, we're going to be talking about these subjects for a very long time to come, much more frequently, aren't we?
Yes. Yes, unfortunately we are. But the good news is,
yes,
we have, the compassion, empathy, support, training. We have those things to help everybody through.
mm-hmm.
And all it takes is a little compassion on the other end too, just to recognize if somebody's having a caregiver, let alone the loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have some compassion and just recognize that maybe they're having a really bad day, and maybe a hand on their shoulder is better
Yes,
than honking your horn or pushing them aside.
exactly.
If we all had that kind of compassion for everybody, our world would be a much better place. So
Yes, it definitely would be. It would be. If we just stop and think right for a moment. I mean, those are lessons that really we have learned before, but we sometimes tend to forget to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, because you really don't know what they're going through. You have no idea. But again, it's wonderful. And I thank you for this service, because I think that this is so wonderful, and something that we all need to hear about more often. So it would be lovely to have your partner on to talk about the other types of caregiving, because there are so many more, as you said, correct?
well, we're gearing her up. She's a little bit camera shy, so we're gearing her up to get some of the word out there, because she's dealing with majorly minors.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody under 25, 13 to 25.
Mm-hmm.
And that still astounds me, how
How
many
many, right?
children are
Have to be
caring
caretakers.
for,
Yeah.
caring
Isn't that
for their
amazing?
parent.
It's a sad statistic. It is.
Yeah, it is. But and there's not a lot of groups around that help young
Right.
caregivers. So that's what she's trying to break into, the different systems that can help, or that can get the word out,
Mm-hmm.
that she can help them, because she was a young caregiver herself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, we're
Mm-hmm.
working on that, but we're working on getting her to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and
Well, I
everybody
look
has
forward to
their
having
thing.
her on one day when she's prepared, when she's ready to go. But again, I want to thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking the time today. It was
And I want to thank
wonderful.
you. I want to thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're
I've
quite
really
welcome.
enjoyed this.
You're quite welcome. I did too. Again, thank you so much. So such important information. Have a wonderful day, Jennifer.
Same to you. Thanks.
Thank you.